Today I'm looking at my 2001 Kawasaki ZR-7S, and as you can probably see right there, the blinker mounts have failed. And what you can actually see on there is that I've got some duct tape on there, and this is camouflage duct tape, so you're not supposed to be able to see it, but of course it's there. And the reason for the duct tape was I thought if I put some duct tape on these things it would hold them together just temporarily, but that didn't work, and as you can see it just kind of fell apart more. The first thing that I'm going to do is remove this old duct tape that I had on here, since it's now in the way. And you can kind of see now what the boot looks like without the duct tape, and it's supposed to just sit up like that and be a little bit flexible so that if you bump into it or something it doesn't bend or break or whatever. But you know, seeing the bike is 15 years old, this rubber has kind of gotten dried out and cracked and it's failed, so time to replace it. Well, I can't tell if that's focused or not, but you can kind of see there, I got the new replacement brackets from Ron Ayers, and you can see the part number there. I'll read it off in case this isn't focused. It's a 23051-1207 for a 2001 Kawasaki ZR-7S, but I believe these brackets will fit a variety of different Kawasaki's. Okay, in case that wouldn't focus before, I found this label on one of the blinker brackets that clearly shows the part number there, and that these are actually genuine Kawasaki parts. So there's the number if you need it. Here's the bracket here. This is what it looks like. It's just a piece of molded rubber, and you can kind of see there. It's just got a couple of holes in it. And this part is the same on both sides. So I just needed to order quantity 2 of that same part number that I showed just a second ago. I'm looking behind the fairing at the back side of the blinker mount, and you should be able to see there's one screw there, and I think all I need to do is remove that and it should come out. Now I'm actually laying on my back on the ground, and I'm looking up underneath the fairing and underneath the headlight, and you can kind of see the wires and some connectors that'll need to be disconnected and removed in order to disconnect the wire from the bike. So I'll need to do that, and then there is the back of the blinker mount, and there's just a single screw on there, and I think removing that screw will allow everything to come off of the bike. So okay, now looking down, I'm on top of the bike here. If I can get this thing to kind of focus and show, I'm looking behind the handlebars here and behind the fairing, and you can see the wires here. I've already got one disconnected, but I wanted to kind of make sure that I showed this, because this is another way to access it. And it looks like I can get at the wires either by laying on my back and going kind of behind the fairing, or I can kind of go from the top and work my way in there. It would probably be easier to remove the fairing altogether, but that would take a little more time, and I don't feel like doing that. I think this can be done just with a little bit of extra effort without removing it. Okay, you can see here I've got the wires disconnected, and if I can get some kind of reasonable focus going here, you can see that there's a blue wire, a black wire with a green stripe, and a white wire, or a whitish wire, maybe it's gray. And so those wires on the blinker side down there mate to the wires here underneath the fairing of more or less the same color. The white one may have a black stripe on it on the bike side. And when I removed the wires, I found the easiest method was to have one hand down here below the fairing and the other on top, and then I could just kind of pull on either side of the wire, and they were able to disconnect, and that kept the strain off of the wire and just allowed me to pull the connectors apart. They may not be quite as easy to put back together, but we'll deal with that when the time comes. Now I'll remove the screw that's behind the blinker mount here. And I've got that loosened up with the screwdriver. I'll just pull it the rest of the way off with my finger. And there's the screw. And let's see. Now there's a metal bracket on the back that the screw mounts through, that you can see there. now I believe this will just kind of pull out of the fairing, kind of like that. Oh, looks like there's another kind of a plate there on the back side of the wire. So that just pulled out, and then you can see the plate there with the captive nut that holds on the other side of the fairing opening here. So now it looks like we can just remove the rest of the rubber bracket. I've got the blinker over here on the bench, so I'm going to remove this plate first, and I'm going to note that the nut part goes in towards the blinker when I reassemble that. And you can see here it looks like the rest of the bracket is just held on with a single nut, and I'm just going to use a 10mm socket on that nut, and let's see if that got it. Okay, so now I'm guessing this should just pop off of here, and it looks like I just have to thread it through the wire. Yeah, forgot to take this metal bracket out before I pulled the rubber bracket out, but that, and then there is the old rubber boot, and you can kind of see that the bottom side of it's okay. It's still kind of good, but the top side just cracked and ripped and dried out from being old. Now I'm going to put the new bracket on, and I'm going to put the wires through the smaller hole first, and just make sure I get the wire insulation down through there. And I should be able to slide that down the wire, and you can kind of see here that this stud goes through the other hole and then just kind of mounts up on the blinker, and that's what it sort of looks like once it's in. Next up, I'm going to put this bracket back on. I'm going to thread the wires through this hole with the flanges facing out away from the blinker body, and I'm just going to kind of thread this through and make sure that that other hole is lined up and over the stud that's in there. You can kind of see. Now I can put the nut on there, and I'm going to use my socket. Since this boot's not ripped, it's harder to get my finger in there. So I'll just thread this on. And now I'll just tighten this up. And that seems pretty good. Next up, I'll take the backing plate, and I'll put this on, making sure that the welded nut part faces in towards the blinker body. And you can kind of see that this plate fits in this direction, and there's actually a lip on the back of the rubber boot that this can slip into. So I'll kind of get that in there like that. As you can see, that kind of holds it in place nicely. And now I think I can put this back on the bike. Okay, so back over here at the bike, I'm going to mount the blinker back in, and of course with the lens facing forward. So I'm going to kind of make sure the wires are through and not pinched, and then you can kind of see on here there's a lip around the boot that fits into the body of the fairing, and just will kind of snap into place there, and we'll just kind of squeeze that and work it in. Okay, I'm back here behind the fairing again, and I'm showing the back of the blinker bracket, that metal piece that I showed earlier when I was on the bench that I kind of put in the lip there. And as soon as I started trying to put this in the fairing and kind of squeezing and prodding the rubber, it popped back out. So once I got the blinker boot seated in the fairing, I had to reseat the plate back here, and that was a little bit tricky. I had to kind of squeeze it in there and then use a small flat-bladed screwdriver to kind of help pull those rubber tabs back over it. If you can kind of see them there, if I can get the camera to kind of show what's going on there. So that was a little bit fiddly, but not too bad. Next up, I'll mount the other backing plate in, and you can kind of see here, hopefully you can see, there's a little bit of a tab on the back of this thing, and this locks into a little hole or slot that's on the back of the other plate there to kind of keep everything sandwiched together. And then the wires just get routed through this little U-shaped cutout. Okay, so I've got the screw tightened up, and now the next thing to do is to reconnect the wires here. And again, that'll probably be a little tricky, trying to get these connectors seated into the mating connectors that are in the wiring harness on the bike. Okay, so I've done one of the wires, and they don't go together quite as hard as I thought they would. So what I think the easiest thing to do here is I've got the blinker side wire, and I happen to grab the white one here, and I've already got my hand over the top on the bike side wire. I've got the mating white wire up here, and I'm just going to kind of do this by feel and just kind of work my way up. And this one's a little trickier because the mating connector is higher up in the bike behind the fairing. The first one I did wasn't quite as high. Yeah, I think this one I need to do from below. I've got the wires touching, but I can't put enough force on them to get them to mate. So I think I'll lay down on my back and do the other two. Okay, you should be able to see there that I've got all three wires reconnected. And I'm up here looking behind the handlebars again and kind of behind the fairing. And what I found was the easiest way to reconnect those was to stand sort of on this side of the bike and just kind of reach through here with my hands and put them together. It wasn't the easiest thing to do, but I was able to get them after some fiddling around. Now you can see with the blinker mounted, it's secure in there. I can kind of bump it around and it stays where it should stay, but has some play, and you know, won't break off or anything. And if I turn on the key, you can see that the light comes on, which means I've got part of it wired right. And if I activate the blinker, you can see that it does what it's supposed to do, so I've got it wired up correctly. Now that I've got the first one done, I can do the second one. And the process is more or less a step and repeat of the first one, so I won't bother showing that on video. I'll just go ahead and do it. Okay, so as it turns out, I ended up having a little trouble with the opposite side. You can see here, this is the screw that holds in the backing plates, and it was just stuck in the bike, and I ended up stripping the head off, and I ended up having to rip the whole thing out of the bike. The rubber piece just kind of separated from the plate and came out, just being brittle in the first place, and I had to use a pair of vice grips to get this thing off of here. But as you can see, it's kind of ruined, and I found this screw in my junk box. It's the same thread and more or less the same length, but it's a socket head screw instead, but I don't think that'll matter. You can see here that I've got the other side mounted and in place now, and kind of like I mentioned before, I had to use a little bit different screw because I ruined the original, but it all seems to be working just fine. More or less the same thing as the other side. So just to check here that everything is set right, I can turn that on, and you can see the light come on, and then I'll activate the blinker, and that seems to be working just fine too. That'll just about do it for replacing the blinker brackets on this 2001 Kawasaki ZR-7S. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to subscribe or leave a comment, feel free to do that as well. And I think it's time for me to go take a ride, so thanks for watching.